cliche. Yeah, this might be a very cliche panel, but there will be very few basic questions that we'll ask anyway, because there might be people who have this question. So even though Vishal sir has answered multiple times the same questions, we might be asking the same questions again to get the views of the two of you. And very basic question. Sapna, you have been doing some amazing things when it's coming coming to horror, especially with this female centric horror film festival that is happening next year. So you, from a celebrity hairstylist to an actor, director, producer, now the founder of a film festival, how's the journey been, and how did this shift happen, in all these years?
I think that first of all, I think I've always been a horror person in all my films.
Yeah.
Horror is very evident. Like even if you saw my documentary Hindustan,
Yeah.
I was just represented as this pair of legs walking around everywhere. So a lot of people saw that element in there.
Yeah.
I think after that, to my new film, My Dog is Sick, Mera Pitta Bimar Hai, which has just started its festival journey. I think horror, fantasy, sci-fi is something that I'm really attracted to. And unfortunately, in India, it's not really a huge genre yet, even for men. For women, it's non-existent, but for men, it's like kind of getting there with Vishal and Patrick leading the way. So thanks, mates. But I feel like as women, we need more women telling stories. So I'm very happy that I kind of collaborated with three they're like insane women collectives worldwide, and just getting inspired by them. And I wrote my third film, which is called Bear Like Man, which is full on horror, gore, fantasy, gore. Did I say gore? It's gore. So I can't wait to get some funding. Yeah. But women in India, like always, have a really hard time getting funding for their projects. So I'm hoping some great man or woman will come and say, hey, Sapna, you want to make a gory film? Yeah, take some money and make this gory film. So, yeah.
True. Very nice. Yeah, I think that's one thing where even I'll agree to the funding part very on a very personal level, considering we host ScareCon, and we still don't have any sponsors. But I think things might change or will change with more things coming out. But this very basic questions I have, and even though no one asked, but sabke dimag mein hota hai, everyone has this question: how important or why the horror genre is important? Maybe we'll start with Patrick with this. Why the horror genre is important?
Well, the horror genre is an ancient kind of form of storytelling, isn't it? If you go back as far as like Jabberwocky and all these kind of ancient stories that involve people going off to fight monsters and save their community from some monster that's ravaging the land. I think the Epic of Gilgamesh even could perhaps be considered to be horror in the fact that he's having to fight a monster. So it's like horror has been with humanity for a very, very long time. So there's obviously some kind of primal urge that we have as people to listen and be told horror stories. I think people on an innate level like to be scared. I think it's enjoyable. It's like an adrenaline rush, and the same as going skydiving or being on a roller coaster. It's that primal effect that horror gives you. The other thing, of course, is it's horror has been the kind of starting point for many kind of first-time film directors, people like Peter Jackson, Sam Raimi, who have gone on to have amazing, huge careers because your concept depends on the story and the scare factor, as opposed to certain things like actors, stars, etc., etc. So you can sell a horror story, a horror film, based on a very small budget. Doesn't have to have big stars or whatever. So it's actually quite a liberating genre to work within. And then, of course, I think one of the subjects of this talk was about the things that you can communicate with horror.
Correct.
The metaphors, the stuff that you want to discuss without being too overt about it. I think that horror allows you to do that, like sci-fi and fantasy does. So I suppose that would be my answer to that question.
Vishal sir, what are your thoughts?
No, I think Patrick more or less said whatever had to be said. But yeah, I mean, for me, it started as I mean, if I'm coming from outside the industry, what is something new that I can offer to the industry? And the only thing that the industry lacked, or one of the things that the industry lacked, was good horror films. And I thought, let me make something, I mean, let me offer something different. But yeah, the industry was not so welcome. I mean, it's not just with females, it's with males as well. Sapna, it's a problem of funding for good stories in this industry. It's not very easy to sell good stories. It's easier to sell the traditional stories with the traditional tropes, but it's not easy to sell something different. I'm sure we all have faced that, including Patrick. But yeah, so that's where it was. So the making that first film was not at all easy. Till somewhere I also thought that, let me put my own money and make it. So that's how it all starts. And then somewhere you find one person who the universe offers to you,
Believes
and
in you. Yeah.
and yeah, and then the journey starts from there. So yeah, but yeah, the primary my objective was to tell a good horror story and start this genre in this country and make it saleable. And the objective still remains the same today. I mean, in spite of making 3 films now, 2 due release. I mean, post that release, if things open up a little bit more for me, I would be glad. I don't know yet. Let's see. So yeah, and I always have been fascinated by this genre. It's an amazing genre. It just gives you such a high. And one thing which is really amazing about the horror genre is to see the reaction of the audiences. I love doing that. So while when Lapachapi released in theaters, I used to go and sit in the projector room and look at the audiences from top, and I used to like feel such a high when all the audiences together shout and screak and nobody's looking at the mobile phones. And it's such a big high. So yeah, that's one of the main reasons too.
So, sir, is that your inspiration? Because considering, even last time when we were talking at Soho House, you mentioned about, the budget part, the distribution part, or even like Sapna is talking about getting the right funding. Why, not why, so how are you people getting this inspiration ki no matter what happens, humko ye banana hai, like we have to make a content like this, a content on the horror side or the horror genre, like is like for Vishal sir, is that your inspiration, like getting high, seeing people's reaction?
That is one of the high. Other thing is that when you start directing horror, I'm sure Patrick and Sapna would agree to this, but when you start uh, experiencing that kind of a high even while directing, because horror is an extreme genre, right? It
Yeah.
has an extreme of everything, extreme
Mhm.
of scare, extreme of fear, extreme of love. Everything is in its extreme form. So when you start directing that kind of extremity, then moderate direction, like okay, drama scenes and all, they are like a little blah. You're like, okay, fine, yeah, let's get done with this talking, let's move on to some interesting stuff. So it's a different, it's a very it's an art form which gives a different high. I mean, I'm sure Patrick and Sapna would add to this. So that's something else. And then you can't go back to your normal movie making. It becomes a little difficult.
Yeah. Patrick, what is your inspiration on making movies like, some of the best movies that you have made or series?
Um, you know what, I think I'm similar to Vishal in that, like, I want to make that definitive horror story, be it a movie or a TV series or an OTT series, that really just kind of grabs the audience. Like, I still feel like I have to do that. I feel like I haven't made something as scary as I want to make, or as exciting as I want to make. So I feel like I've got a little bit left in me to really try and make that really kind of scary, suspenseful, some kind of iconic monster or story. I feel like I have that yet to do. And also, yeah, I agree that in India, horror is mostly shit, to be honest. Like, it's mostly juvenile nonsense. And the thing is, I think the problem is with the industry that it thinks of horror as some kind of stupid kind of subgenre, which is like, it's like, whenever anybody advertises a horror film or a horror series, they'll have pumpkins and spiders and spider webs and, like, do you know what I mean? And like witches on broomsticks. It's like, what the fuck is that? You know what I mean? This is like this is meant for adults. So it's like, what is the mental block in this industry to actually exhibiting horror in a mature way? So I feel like there's still a lot of ground to be trod. And of course, people like Vishal and Sapna will be doing that, because I think we're a few of the people who want to make mature horror, and horror which is shocking and provocative and confrontational. So I feel like that's part of my drive anyway.
And I think this particular belief, this particular tradition, I think I can call it, lies deep within not just with Bollywood but also other religion, not religion. My point was the state entertainment industries. Like, for example, we had this show in Odisha, and it was a paranormal investigation show. So the very first show, the pilot episode, was at this haunted location we were investigating. So I was one, and there were other crew members, and the shot it. The investigation was really fine. There were things happening, crew members getting scratch marks and everything. It was amazing from an investigation point of view. But when the episode came out, there was nothing about the devices we were using. It was all about cats meowing, someone running like those anklets, or the crickets chirping. Those were the noises all around, and I had to call them and say, "What is this? This is not what I signed up for." So they had to delete the entire episode, and then they had to re-edit it, and then they went. But still, there one thing was, sir, we cannot remove entirely because this is what the audience wants.
Yeah. So when producers start telling you exactly what the audience wants, I've heard it so many times. The Indian audience wants this. They can't concentrate for longer than 90 seconds. The Indian audience, you have to wake them up with a jump scare. It's like you can tell the producer is overcompensating for their own lack of talent, and I've had to deal with that quite a long. I'm sure we all have. Producers second guessing the audience, and then if they know so much about the audience, why do they consistently make such awful content? Anyway, sorry, I'm not going to get on a rant.
Sapna, what is your inspiration? With your movies traveling to Iceland and Berlin and other countries, why horror? Where does your inspiration lie?
I think if you look around you, everything is so horrific. I mean, why not horror? I mean, this is what I say. How else would you tell a story if not horror? But horror in India, a lot of people think it's just but there's a lot to horror which is also silent, and I'm a big fan of that. So my new film, like I said, which is traveling the festivals right now, it's a 64-minute, no dialogue, silent film. It has no dialogues, and it's about a couple, and it's so horrific. It uses a lot of sexuality, and it uses a lot of psychological horror to tell stories of two people who are just stuck in one place and they don't leave the apartment. And I just feel like stories like that, a lot of people think maybe they don't fall in the classic horror genre, but they're horrific. And these are genres that in India we must explore, because a lot of people, they automatically feel, oh, horror means just loud and loud. But it's not that. Silent is also a language, which I'm really appreciating, because India, everything is so loud. I mean, you walk out of your house and it's loud. Everywhere you go, it's loud. And, in this lockdown, a lot of times, people started saying, oh, silence is violence. And if you're silent means you don't take a stand and blah, blah, blah. But the thing is, silence is such a great language. It says so much more. Than a dialogue would, So I think this is becoming more and more my style, which is silent films, which is sound and music design, because even Sindhustan, for that matter, which was a documentary on Sindhis, but it was quite silent. And going from there to My Dog is Sick, which is 100% no dialogues. And in Bear Like Man, there's only one dialogue, which the witch gets to say, because I said, why not? Let there be one line and let the witch say it. But I just
Who's acting as the witch, Sapna? Yeah, right. You gave yourself the only line.
And it's like, kill him. That's the line.
Nice.
Off with the head. That's the. I'm still trying to figure that out, Vishal. Vishal and Patrick, when you are in Bombay next, I have to get that one line sorted.
Great.
Hoping that I would get funding for this. Yeah.
So we have actually, to be very honest, putting in a very raw and straightforward way, we have a lot of complaints with the kind of movies, horror movies that were made in the past here in Bollywood. But if I am supposed to ask, that one horror movie in India where that you people have watched and you have commented, oh, it did not reach where it should have, the destination, but it did try well. What is that one movie? Okay, हाँ यार अच्छा था, but हुआ नहीं ठीक से that way.
That's a tough question, man. That's a tough question. I have no answer for it, really. I really have no answer for that.
There must be one. There must be one.
Exactly.
Come on.
I mean,
I
I
really
just
can't
feel the
comment on
entire Ramsey
Or like a rating of 2 out of 5 at least.
this.
3.5.
My God, that's.
Makri, you think? Maybe
Makri was a different film. I don't know. Was it horror? I don't think so. It was horror.
it
was
was
more
quite
fantasy.
horrific, yeah.
Seeing a
I
monkey
haven't seen it.
attacking.
I don't think I've seen it. What is
Yeah.
it? The Fly.
Makri,
The-
Makri.
Yeah.
Spider, spider.
Okay, yeah, I've seen
Ah.
it. I've seen it. Yeah.
Makri
Yes.
has Shabana Azmi in it.
I remember one film of with it's actually an Odia film, or was it
Oh.
Assamese film? Sorry, an Assamese film by Bhaskar. I can't remember the name right now, but that
Oh,
was
you're talking
quite
about
a
the
good
new
film.
one
No, not Amis, the one before that.
before that.
It
Yeah,
was an
yeah,
anthology. It was an anthology, I believe. It was quite
Yeah.
well made. I quite liked it. So
Okay.
I
Yeah.
would say in the recent times, I think that was a well-made horror film. I feel. I
Yeah.
will tell you the name right away. I'll just have
Okay.
to. It's an Assamese name, so I can't remember it, but I'll tell you it right away.
Yeah,
But I
think
know
what
which one you're talking about. Sham. I just met Sham actually 2 months ago. He was telling me about it. Yeah.
Yeah. So, but Sapna, what is that you one?
No, I feel like the entire Ramsey Brothers anthology, like we were huge in that B grade horror zone, okay?
Yeah.
And did you know, because I didn't know, and not that it's important, but I'm just so proud that I just found out this year that the Ramsey Brothers were Sindhi, okay? And they dropped the Ram Singhani and they just made themselves Ramsays. And there were 7 brothers, and all of them did one part of another in this horror genre. I feel like this is just an epic journey to see, like, one was an editor, one was a director, one was a producer, one is a cinematographer. I mean, they all played such fabulous roles in the journey of making films.
Yeah.
And they're all horror. And even if you look at their posters, the iconic posters in like Purani Haveli and stuff like that, I mean, I've been watching it again, and it's been insane to see what these brothers kind of achieved back then. And since then, there's been a lull, to be honest, in the horror genre, right? And then Vishal and Patrick said, "Hello, knock knock. Let's like hello, do some shit about this, and let's kind of like stir it up a little bit." And it's been really fabulous that that's happened, and also that it's happened on a mainstream platform, you know, like an OTT platform with Patrick putting it out there. But I feel like you know, a lot of people have to look at horror from a different lens and also understand it's a great way of storytelling. It's not just like a lot of people think the horror scripts don't need stories; they just need loud sound design, which is quite ridiculous. You do need a good story. A script is a script is a script. A story is a story is a story. And these are things that are really important for people to even understand, right? Like character sketches, important.
True.
You know, like something that changed. I don't know if you guys ever saw Teeth. Did you, Patrick? Maybe you saw the film Teeth.
Teeth. Is that the one about the woman with the vagina that eats people's penises?
Yeah,
I've seen it.
Oh,
Yeah, I've seen
vagina had teeth, and and I don't know if we can talk about that, but on this platform, but that movie changed me, man. It was crazy. As a woman, it changed me. And the new story that I've written when I was at this Korea market, first of all, they were so excited that there was an Indian woman filmmaker, because they're like, "Oh, hi, we don't see Indian women in this market too often." And what the fuck have you written? It's like crazy. It reminds us of Teeth. And I was like, what did you just say? Like, so I just feel like we need to push boundaries. We need to push the envelope a little bit. And if not horror, if we don't do it in horror, then what are we going to do with that? You know, we should just open that envelope and just go for it, right? Gore. I'm a big fan of gore, so yeah.
Patrick, what is that one movie?
Well, I remember when I kind of first came here, I was trying to kind of binge watch Indian kind of classic horror, or rather, I don't know if you can term it as classic horror, but you know, the Ram Gopal Varma era, I suppose, the kind of 90s and the zeros. And I think I remember I enjoyed this film called Vasu Shastra. I think that's what it's called. Do you guys know that? And and it was kind of cool because it was like haunted house meets zombies towards the end. And I actually I was quite into it at the time. I enjoyed watching it. And then the other one I thought was quite effective was Boot. I think that's 2004. I thought that was decent. You know, it was decent. It was good, and it had good performances. Boots Returns maybe wasn't so good, but yeah, I don't know what happened to that
Returns is never so good, Patrick.
one. Yeah, I'm just trying to think of a good Returns film.
Yeah.
But there only have been this handful of movies which always we have to fall back upon when we talk about horror film. But that's about it, right? You know, there's nothing more.
So does it feel bad after you have watched a bad horror movie? Like, yeah, what the hell is this?
Of course, man. Of course, because our getting funding becomes even more difficult after watching a horror film. Every bad horror film puts our efforts back 10 steps, you know. So one step we take forward, and then a bad movie comes which doesn't make money, and our efforts are gone back, you know. So it's really disheartening to see a bad horror film.
But irrespective of that, Vishal sir, we have seen that few people who are very famous, I don't want to name them, they still come up with horror movies in a couple of years or so. So do you think it is just because they have established a name they're getting the funding? Because if you see their movies, it's the same shit that is being rolled, just some modern added things or a different location, and that's it. You know, and as of now, the most number of horror films are only being shot in London right now.
Yeah, that's correct. It has become just a business module, and I don't know who is even how are they even recovering their money, because they're not even good films, right?
But don't they get good box office, Vishal? Though I mean, like people do watch them, all those rubbish films.
One of them, maybe out of 10, yes, but just that it has become a business module that okay, you shoot in London, you get a good rebate, and you get a little bit money from the theatrical, and then somewhere it goes. I don't know. I mean, but yeah, of course, as you had earlier mentioned that it has become a producer's thing that, you know, a horror film can be made in less money and you don't require stars, and that they use that module to make a bad horror film, which is very sad.
And as Sapna pointed out, I think a lot of the time, because you're making a horror, you feel like, well, there's a shortcut to giving me a good script. You know, it's a horror. So as long as I have a scare scene every 3 or 4 minutes, who gives a fuck about the script? Which is like a horror film is a film at the end of the day. As you said, it needs a good story, it needs good characters, it needs a good script. And there's no shortcut around that at the end of the day.
True. Major changes are needed. But coming to some personal questions, you know, so horror movies basically show what we fear the most. You know, it can be a spirit, or it can be just a monster, or a human turned monster, an abusive father, mother, husband, or anyone. So what do you people fear the most? Like, what is your fear when it comes to the horror genre, or in terms in a personal life, that one thing that you fear the most or scared the most? Starting with Patrick.
I don't know. It's such a broad question.
It can be anything, any phobia, anything.
Okay, I mean, I suppose if I'm in like a straight, like right now I'm in a random hotel I've never been in before, so like I will have like a slightly sleepless night when it's like pitch black. I don't know the history of this place. What if somebody's got murdered in this hotel room? What if somebody slashed their wrist in the shower? You know what I mean? So everything's magnified. You hear the sound and you're like, fucking no. I don't really believe in ghosts, but like I can drive myself nuts in the dark listening to sounds, and so I do. You know, I'm a massive coward. So I let my thoughts and imagination get the better of me. Like I actually just not to go on about it, but like last Christmas I had to go back to England, and I was in quarantine in this old hotel near where my house is in the countryside, and like that hotel freaked me out because there were like dolls sitting on the shelves, and there were like these massive mirrors that I had to turn away from the bed because it was just freaking me out. There were like little doors that were locked that presumably led to secret passages. I was like, this room is gonna kill me. Like I didn't sleep at all that week.
They had designed it for you, Patrick. They knew.
Yeah, exactly. It's a bit of a cliche, isn't it? Like, why the dolls? I mean, everything else is fine, but the dolls is a bit hackneyed.
Was there a secret camera recording your reaction?
I hope not. Maybe. Was that your next film, Vishal? Oh God, I knew it.
Found footage.
Starring Patrick.
Sorry, Patrick, the coward.
Vishal sir, what is that thing that you fear the most?
Actually, they are not very big things. They are actually very small things. Like for the longest time, I had the phobia that what if my wallet gets stolen? It was such a simple thing, but they are actually those small things. These days, like you try to book an Uber and Ola and you don't get it. It's
Yeah.
like you have to prepare yourself that okay, for half an hour I'm not going to get an Ola or an Uber, because they're going to turn you down.
Yeah.
So it's just the simple things actually, and of course then there are bigger things also which are quite a concern, like the law system, the legal system, all of
Okay.
those things. There are many big things. Actually, there are too many big things to talk about.
Yeah.
But then end of the day, our life is small and we are just in this little cocoon. So the smaller things worry us more than the bigger things, right? Those
Yeah.
bigger things happen when they have to happen. But yeah.
Correct. Sapna, what is that one thing you fear the most in your life?
I think that I'm terrified of mother-in-laws. Yeah. I think that in India they're the most horrific, and especially, I mean, maybe not you two men, but when it comes to most boys and the whole mom complex and the whole, I mean, I've been doing a lot of research on Oedipus and just comparing Indian boys and their moms and the love story that happens, and I feel like mother-in-laws are terrifying. I know I've been doing a lot of research about women who, one of them, she was burnt by her mother-in-law because of
Okay.
dowry. So I feel like just that there is patriarchy. Very few people actually really talk about matriarchy, and it's really rampant in our country. It's rampant. And I don't know what happens to women once they have a son and the son gets married. I don't know what happens to them. And so, even in my new film, Bear Like Man, I address that a lot. I address the mother. I address the mother-in-law, and I think these are um, very everyday things. And in horror, they make great subjects. I mean, great subjects. Like, I mean, I couldn't look at a mother-in-law like a human ever, ever.
You're
So
right. You're
I
right.
just,
If you have seen a small film called Lapa Chapi,
yeah,
you know who the
yeah,
villain of the film was, right?
yeah.
So,
So
so yeah.
I just feel like, but as a woman, when a woman, the thing is, when a woman writes about a mother-in-law and talks about female characters, there's a lot more, it's a different perspective, right? And I feel like what you bring to the table is also something maybe a little different. So I'm quite excited about writing about that. In my new film, and also I feel like horror, a lot of people, in India in general, when it comes to fiction, we just don't get it. We don't get it. All our films have to be steeped in reality, and every time you go to a theater, someone will say, "अरे ऐसे थोड़ी होता है, अरे वेंचर नहीं होता है भाई, ये फिक्शन है,
But
ऐसे नहीं होता है तो ठीक है,
these are the
नहीं होना
current
चाहिए,
times.
चल
Yeah.
ये
These are,
डॉक्यूमेंट्री नहीं है भाई, ये फिक्शन है, right?"
but these are the
And
current times. We were actually never like this. But somewhere in these current times, somewhere we have just gone towards showing reality, which is actually not even reality. I don't know
Yeah.
what are we
it's
showing.
it's actually a very rich gaze on what poor people are. It's a fuck all gaze, actually. Just the gaze is wrong. Okay, so I just feel like, if you're a man or a woman, and if you want to do fiction, to fiction, man. What's stopping you? Why does your rain have to be rain? Why can't it be like pig feet falling from the sky? Why does it have to be raindrop? It is fiction. Anything can happen. Use your imagination. But in India, when they go to see a fiction film and they look at characters, they're always like, "Arey, aise thodi hota hai. Arey bhai, very good.
No,
ऐसे
no.
नहीं होना चाहिए.
When a
Go
big
watch a
star does it, anything
documentary.
can happen. When a big
Huh?
star does it, anything can happen. It's
Right. So I really would like to see more fiction. I mean, in horror, obvious obs, but in general, I would really like to see that term fiction used more, and people actually get out of this real life that we are so trapped in India, and kind of like go beyond that, like take me to a world, take me somewhere else, not in Switzerland dancing in mountains, but there are other worlds. Take me there.
But even when when it comes to paranormal and still you write something like based on real life incidences, people still question. ऐसे थोड़ी होता है यार.
That's what I'm saying. And to be honest, I'll tell you, when I was 18, my dad passed away, right? Then I moved to America. And when I was 21, one day I came home from work. I lived in a little studio apartment, okay? And I walked into my apartment and my father was sitting on my work chair, just lounging, like, what's up? And I'm like, oh, hey, what's up? Like, what are you doing here? And he was like, oh, I'm going to be reborn tomorrow. I just want to make sure you're okay. And I see that you're okay. So, yeah, I'm going to be in Lokhandwala. Address, sab kuch de diya mujhe. And I was like, whoa. So I called my mom. I said, bhai, Dad is going to be reborn at this address in Lokhandwala. I'm in America. Please check it out. Since you're in Lokhandwala. And she did. And he said he would be a baby girl. And he was. And there was a girl born. And so, and as a kid, my nanny, my mother's mother, my mom and she used to make the most killer Ouija boards and she used to call spirits all the time. I was raised with spirits as a young child. So I don't think that they are any weirder. I feel like, like I said, mother-in-laws are more horrific than a ghost, real people. But I don't feel like this whole thing of that world and this world and they don't exist and we exist is quite rubbish. As a matter of fact, I think we coexist, and the minute you start coexisting with them, you kind of understand how beautiful this relationship is and what wonderful stories we can actually write about them and us in general.
Correct. So, a very technical question. There's this university in Florida that had published a paper that people go out to watch terror and horror in cinemas because they are releasing the negative emotions that is stored inside them. Do you agree to this very sentence that people go out to watch horror movies because they have a lot of stored negative emotions, and watching these movies is like that roller coaster effect? You just want to have thrill that you don't get in your general life. Do you agree to this very sentence? What are your thoughts, Patrick?
Well, I guess if they've done a study, they know what they're talking about. I mean, I'm not really an intellectual or an academic, but I guess it's the catharsis we all enjoy when we watch something that stirs our emotions, isn't it? It's the catharsis we get when we're sad and we listen to sad music, or if we're it's a catharsis, isn't it? Like any other form of kind of emotional release. So yeah, of course, I suppose it's getting something out of you which up to that point was contained within you. So yeah, I suppose.
Yeah, Vishal sir, what do you think? What are your thoughts?
I think must be. Even I'm not so sure about the science.
So what are your reactions when you watch a very good movie, not Bollywood, like very good horror movie? Like, do you ever do you yourself bring yourself to that consciousness to realize ke yaar mere andar kya chal raha hai while I'm watching this thing?
See, I'm just trying to think what I felt as a young kid, because now so we are way beyond understanding what we feel, because now it's become a profession. But I think when I was watching it as a kid, when I start to watch a horror film, I want to see the end of it, because I want to feel that closure, right? So I think maybe that's a reflection of life, maybe somewhere if something bad is happening, we want to ensure that something good comes out of it, right? We want a closure somewhere for everything. I don't know, maybe that's one of the things I feel, it's possible.
Correct. So I believe, I am of a firm belief that people fear monsters and spirits, or we call it demons, or or cryptids as we call them, is because they don't fall under the category or the conditions the society has made. Society has made that human should look like this. It should have 2 legs, couple of hands and eyes and everything. But the moment that becomes translucent or an additional leg comes out, they consider, oh, they cannot fit into the society, and they start, fearing out. And I think that also reflects in our movies, because no matter, like Sapna was mentioning, the fiction part, every time it's always the same thing that keeps on happening. This disembodied legs. Even like one of the most recent trailers that I watched, the trailer was very good, but now that I'm reading the reviews, it's shit. It has become a shit right now. The trailers are made very good, but then the movies, they turn out really bad. Now, there's this trend that I have seen in Hollywood where, the very one study that I was reading on, that when the World War was happening, there was a lot of blood that was spilled in the US and other parts of the country. So the Hollywood started making movies on vampires because, they were related to blood. Then the Cold War started happening. Cold War was more of an inside home job. Not many things were happening on a very public level, but inside under things were happening. So they started making movies like The Shining and the Nightmare on Elm Street and stuff like those, where things were happening inside the house, murders were happening inside the house, but no one had any idea. The neighborhood had no idea that there was a murder. Then came the 2010s when things started happening with the family, where the teenagers or the millennials, they don't share things about or the experiences they are going through. They restore or keep their emotions within themselves. They're not very open to it, and that is when movies like The Hereditary or movies like Babadook or The Quiet Place and movies like those were made. Do you think there is, or there will be, a similar kind of a trend that will happen in India as well when the horror thing blooms? Or do you think it has already begun? Like, people are making horror movies with term of, or with the kind of things that are happening with the society? Do you think there is a trend, or there will be a trend in future? We can start with Shapna.
Well, I lived in Chicago in the 90s.
Yeah.
And there was a really big goth movement, and there was a really big vampiric movement. It's something I'm writing in my book, but I was a vampire.
Okay.
And there was this place called the Dome Room, and it was in downtown Chicago where all the vampires hung out. And there was Eric. He was this German man. Let's just call him Eric. And he was the head vampire, and all the women were like all crazy about him. And anyways, so Eric and I got married in a vampiric ceremony that I will write about in my book. But anyways, what I'm trying to say is that the blood and the whole vampire scene, what we know in India, is actually very ancient. And what the biggest problem is also the really young generation who think they know it all. And that to me has fucked up a lot of things because they haven't experienced it. They read about it maybe online and they think they know everything about the culture. But the thing is, till you don't really suck blood, till you don't really taste blood, you really don't know what it's like to be a vampire. And who are vampires? You won't really know. And like one of the greatest films ever made, The Last Lovers Left Alive. And let me tell you, Tilda in that film, which it's a vampire film, and the way that she played it, because this whole thing of vampires are gory and evil and they're all of that. Sure, Anne Rice wrote it and, it was played really well. But the point is, they could also be just normal, just lovers and just hanging out. And I really loved the way how that was depicted. And I think that something like this needs to be made and brought into the Indian mainstream, in not just horror, in all genres, because I feel like storytelling is just so loud. I just feel like a little bit of subtlety and a little bit of love, but you can't blame them because not too many people have really experienced this. And I feel when you've experienced it, what you bring to the table is far greater than what you would read or what your limited imagination is going to really let you talk about. So not only was I raised with it with my nanny and my mom, I feel like even in America, just being in the culture, being a vampire, being married to a vampire, getting out of the scene, has really, there are a lot of stories. There are a lot of stories that I would like to tell. And I think now is the time, because back then, this has been my curse, way ahead of my time, all the time. So I have waited, and I think now is the time. And people are kind of ready to hear these stories. And so we must tell these stories in this way. It's a love story. It's not a horror story. It's a love story. And this is what we need to look at. Look at it in that lens, is what I'm saying. When we think of horror, a lot of people just look at it in a very, oh, no, I'm not into that. But are you in a relationship that is very unkind and horrific? Yeah. Well, then you should be into horror because you're living it, my friend. So we need to just change that lens altogether.
Yeah. Vishal sir, what do you think about this trend?
Hey, what you said is right. It's usually, I mean, it is a reflection of the horrors of the society. Currently, with the way, I mean, with COVID and with this whole thing of telling real stories, currently the trend is to tell, I mean, to say stories which have some kind of a social messaging. That's the current trend according to the industry. Fortunately, when I made Lapachapi, that was not too much of a pressure, but these days that is the pressure because that's what people want to suddenly, they want to be socially relevant for some reason. So that's the trend right now. So I think it's right now, if anybody goes with a horror story which has to say something, then it will be picked up easily. I'm not sure what the quality of the
good to know, Vishal.
but yeah, absolutely. That's how it is. Whatever sells, no? I mean, end of the day, if Chinese cuisine is selling, then everybody will start doing Chinese cuisine. It's as simple as that, right? So right now that's the trend. So yeah, I mean, so that I think it just reflects the trend of the society in that current scenario.
Patrick, what do you think?
Well, it's a very big question. I mean, yes, of course, like horror will be a reflection of the society that we live in today and always has been. I think nowadays, I mean, ever since 9/11, the US certainly have been traumatized, and you've seen a lot of apocalyptic horror stories being created and still being created as we approach our inevitable end of civilization. We're making a lot of end of civilization stories, whether or not it's horror or sci-fi or whatever. So yeah, I mean, of course, yes. I don't know, as far as kind of current horror in India goes, I suppose the challenge is what you're allowed to say and what you can get away with, what you can hide within the subtext of what you're making. But at the same time, yes, as Vishal says, it's also nice just to tell a story without having the pressure of having to kind of force in a social message.
Okay, so we are anyway reaching the end of this panel. I have last couple of questions. So you all three being the ardent fans, some of the biggest fans of horror and horror creation or content making, according to the three of you, what makes, it's a very cliche question, what makes a good horror movie? Since we all have been complaining again that some things need to be changed, this needs to be changed. What is that one thing, if we change, or if we find that particular key, it will change everything ever made or will be made in future? Starting with Vishal sir.
So see, end of the day, we are in a business, right?
Yeah.
Films, I mean, once if somebody invests some money, there has to be returns first of all, right? So that is something which we cannot forget, especially in this industry, in Bollywood.
True.
Where is it disappeared? Have you disappeared, Sarva? Your video is gone.
He's there.
Okay.
He's
So are you going to come back soon or what?
I'm here. I'm here.
Okay.
A disembodied voice calling from beyond the grave. Oh no, he's there.
Yeah. So what I was saying was that it has to sell and it has to make money, right?
Yeah.
Now when we spoke about a certain kind of films, they have been made again and again because people hope that those kind of films will make money because there is no other way being shown by anybody else, right? But if somebody else would start a new trend, would try to make films which would still earn money, would be different films or different way of storytelling, but if they can still try and make money, then that thing also will pick up. So it will take some time for this industry to develop a taste for it, but for that, lot of films will have to be made, right? The industry will need to taste different varieties and different genres and different styles of storytelling in this particular genre, right? And that has to be encouraged by the producers. So somewhere either the producer or a big star has to take a certain stand and try and tell these stories and make them work, and slowly these different genres will get a boost, and then we all will have our free will to make all kinds of stories that we want, So I think
I'd like to just add to that what Vishal was saying, which I totally agree with, which is the other thing, of course, is that there's a certain responsibility that lies with the critics, right? The critics, the journalists who write about film and chronicle film and television in this country, right? I feel like they're not doing their job, because I feel like when I, for example, released my series, the kind of reaction to it was incredibly kind of infantile, in that like it wasn't appreciated that we were trying to do something slightly different, and we paid the price for trying to do something different, right? We tried to do something innovative. There were problems, but like the reaction was so toxic that will set people back. That will tell producers, oh no, we shouldn't try that, because look what happened with that series. You know what I mean?
Yeah, that's
like
true.
like Vishal was saying.
So I did experience that with Lapachapi, because when Lapachapi released, the first day what the critics wrote was not very motivating, But but at that time, because social media was still not on the phones as yet, so it did not reach a lot of people. So people still went in not knowing what the critics have said, and then they started enjoying the movie, and then the word of mouth spread, But now social media is the biggest bane. I mean, social media, this wrong messaging just spreads, and then people start developing a certain notion.
There are kind of trolls. There are people who want to talk shit, review bombers, people who don't even watch it and just see the trailer and they want to review bomb something. It's a very toxic environment to release stuff into. Very toxic.
But I think we should just keep making, because we just have to keep making. Whatever works, it works. Whatever, as long as the producer recovers his money, I think people have become numb, and that's I mean, the audience is suffering because of their own trolling. We won't bother about the audience anymore, right? We'll just make what we have to make, because if the audience doesn't care, then what do we do, right? But I mean, there is certainly a huge chunk of audience which really enjoys, but then they should come up and start writing good stuff.
They're not as vocal as the people who want to talk shit are much more vocal than the people who are.
Like even with my film, My Dog is Sick, every Indian film festival curator was like, oh, I don't think this is for Indian audiences. I'm like, no shit, shouldn't you then show it to them only because it's not for them? Because they're not used to seeing something like that, right? That's why you should show it to them.
True.
And this is the exact issue that's happening, like Patrick and Vishal are saying. The critics, anyways, I mean, I've never really cared for them, but they do have a really big say on what's really going on, and the media push for it. It's like the same film that will travel to every festival all over the world. Go to all the Indian film festivals here, and then come back to India. Oh, it's a hit, right? And it's like, okay, there are like a million films. You know what I mean? So to break away from the norm, this is why I went Film Festival, which is only gonna concentrate on horror and sci-fi and fantasy, because we need festivals that say, okay, sure, that's a great film. Okay, you've traveled the world, that's great, but there are other filmmakers and there are other films, and what happens to those films? So I'm quite excited to take my festival to that avenue, next year, and collaborate with people on a worldwide platform, because in India, it's still a very young thing, and there aren't too many women who are making films in this genre. But we want to break that, and we hopefully hope that in the future there's no gender. Anyways, it's just a horror film, not made by a woman or made by a man. Yeah, but right now we're playing that card because it's necessary.
I think to answer all three of you, not answer, but mention, I think that this is one of the major initiatives or aims of ScareCon, is to celebrate horror and paranormal, and give it the the deserved respect, or at least try to give it the respect it deserves, because somewhere things do get bhar jata hai, daba dete hain hum log, and we are very good at it in dabawing things. And so that is what ScareCon aims at. The aim is to celebrate horror the way it is, not how people or few people want it to, like the critics to say. But ending this panel with a very light question, and very a question that our viewers might enjoy. What are you people watching this Halloween? Your recommendation for this Halloween, Patrick?
Well, I'm just trying to think in a horror-related way. There's been a recent crop of kind of interesting Blumhouse movies coming out. There's A Quiet Place 2, which I still haven't seen. There's Old, which I haven't seen, the M. Night Shyamalan film that I really want to see. Christ, now my mind's gone blank. What were we just watching? I don't know. There's so many of these South Korean series and films that are always around to find that they're always so good. I just watched that series Midnight Mass, which I have to say I was a little bit. It was a bit too talky, I think. Sorry, I'm just gonna have to unhook that phone. Sorry.
Sure. Vishal, sir, what are you watching this Halloween?
So
Apart from your own movie. That will be all
my
about.
movie is not coming on Halloween. It's coming post end of next month. Yeah.
Yeah.
So one good news. I mean, which is it's a good news for all of us. I went to see Quiet Place 2 in the theaters.
Okay.
On Friday evening, I think, or maybe Saturday
Amazing.
evening. Okay. And the theater was 80% packed to capacity.
Oh wow.
Though it was a 50% occupancy, but
Yeah,
it
but
was
still.
80% packed to capacity in a 10:30 show,
Ah.
So that was very motivating. I said, okay, I mean, people should come and understand that this genre people do want to watch, So,
Correct.
so in spite of COVID, all of that, people have come in to watch Quiet Place 2 in the theaters, which is, when it's a small film, it hardly has any shows, it's not like on No Time to Die or not like a big film. It's a small film, but people have taken that efforts to come to the theater to watch this film.
Correct.
So I was really, really happy to see that.
Nice.
I think I have to also watch a couple of movies which Patrick said right now. I still have to catch up on those. One of these recent Blumhouse films. And Midnight Mass I'm watching right now. I still have 2 episodes to finish that. So that's what I'm watching right now. Yeah.
Okay. Sapna is still there. She went full spectrum. I think.
Going to give us some surprise or something.
I think she's going to do something scary. Actually, I'm quite worried.
Like
she's going to jump out of the darkness.
Yeah.
This is the scariest film that we're going to see this Halloween.
Oh.
Yeah. She's
Okay. Oh, we thought you would do something interesting.
We thought you were going to come back with a scary costume on, Sapna. Oh, is she on mute?
I think she can't hear us.
No. There's some connection issues, I believe.
Okay, wait, I think.
Can you hear us? We can hear you. Yeah.
We can hear you.
Can you hear us?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Can you hear us?
Okay.
Can you hear us?
Yes.
That's exactly what ghost hunters do when they go to an abandoned place.
Right.
Sapna, what are you watching this Halloween?
Actually, I am just going back to the classics, and because I'm writing my script, so I'm watching a whole lot of Carrie these days and Shining, and this really awesome film called Santa Sangre. I don't know if you've seen.
Of course. Santa Sangre.
Yeah, I'm watching Santa Sangre.
Bit of castration for you there over Halloween.
Exactly, mate. That's what I'm doing. I'm just going back to classics at the moment because I'm in writing mode and I'm in a lot of collaboration mode. And Patrick and I have been threatening to write something together. One day we will, and there will be crazy zombies coming.
There will be blood.
Blood! There will be lots of blood! Besides the cupcake that I just had 2 of. That's why I want this to be. But so that's what I'm doing at the moment.
Nice. Thank you so much, everyone. Thank you so much, Sir Patrick.
Thank you.
Vishal sir and Sapna, looking forward to meet you guys tomorrow. Patrick sir, this would have been amazing to have you tomorrow. But
I'm so sorry I couldn't come tomorrow. I apologize again. Next time.
Vishal, I'm gonna suck your blood tomorrow.
Okay.
Bye everyone. Take care. Happy Halloween, everyone.
All right, see you guys
Okay,
later.
bye
Thank you
Sapna,
very
bye
much.
Patrick, bye Sarba.
Bye Vishal, bye Sapna.
Bye.
Bye guys.
Bye, sir.